St. Cyprian is well known for his treatise on the unity of the Catholic Church, which we're also reading for this week. And the treatise begins in chapter 1 with this image of the tempter sneaking into the enemy, sneaking in to secretly deceive us under the appearance of peace, stealing in hidden ways like a little ninja, right? And because of that, we give him the name Serpent, the creepy crawler thing, right? And he goes on later in the epistle to talk about the transformative power that the church has had in community. And a century or so later, St. Athanasius is going to kind of revisit that theme when he says that, look, we know this Christianity thing is reasonable because the prostitutes have become chaste. You can walk from one end of the empire to the other without fear of brigands anymore. The bandits have taken up husbandry. Husbandry is like raising animals, right? Cattle and stuff like that's husbandry. The idols have fallen, and so whether or not that was fully true, it had to be true enough for people to read that and think, yeah, he's got a point here. And so Cyprian has some of this stuff too on page 97, like the blind and the lame, have been healed, and so the enemy has invented new ways to get at us because the power of Christ is too manifest in those regards. So he's got to come at us from this other angle. The overthrowing of faith through the corruption of truth, which is going to divide unity. So when truth is corrupted, unity is divided. So this is pertinent for us today, isn't it? In North America, in the United States. A post-truth era, I've heard it called. And is that not dividing the church? Just the political deception, corruption of the truth, right? Is that in itself, despite the fact that it's outside the church, Christians today are connected with that. And this is what Kavanaugh was saying too in his text, which is why I want you to read him before you read this other stuff. We see the state as the place of salvation. Is there salvation outside the church? We say no, or kind of no, or mostly no, or qualified no, but in reality, do we look for our salvation in the state, in politics, in policy, in legislation, in the judges that get put in the benches? Why is that? I'm sure there's lots of reasons. And I don't think that the answer to that question is something we can get at in this class, but it's a question that is worth pondering. I hope it is something that continues to pester you, to provoke you, because it's not easily answered. Cyprian says there's a lot of good quotes in this reading. He talks about, let me see if I can find it real quickly. The one, he cannot have God as a father who does not have the church as a mother, right? So we have an image on our slide of depicting the motherhood of the church, right? There's a lot of great quotes and insights in this passage, in this reading. But I want to jump to the one on page 110. They cannot abide with God who have been unwilling to be of one mind in God's church. And this is something that you see echoed across the early church. That we can't grow closer to God if we're not growing closer to all those others who are growing closer to God, right? And if we can't abide with God if we've been unwilling to be of one mind in God's church. And so we see that Cyprian is kind of exalting this virtue, this goal, this dream of unity. And he's getting it from the scriptures. I mean, he's quoting scripture out, left and right. Every time you turn around, he's throwing scripture at you, right? He's getting this from scripture. So unity is this great characteristic, evidence of the power of God, the rationality of Christianity, the reasonableness of Christianity. It's in many ways for Cyprian the virtue that establishes all the other virtues. So we have to have unity before we can talk about anything else, before any other virtue makes sense for us, before any other element of the faith makes sense to us. So it's too precious to be lost in that regard. And it has to be protected with like constant vigilance. You can almost hear Mad Eye Moody, see him snarling, constant vigilance, right? So I have a couple of questions as we end this slide. Does the goal of unity, can that in and of itself become an idol that would deceive, that would corrupt the truth? What's the relation between truth and unity? Or justice and unity? If we pursue unity at all costs, then coercion is justified. Baptism at sword point or gun point, right, is justified. Genocide of the marginalized, right? Those with an alternative voice is justified, right? We can silence that schismatic, heretical voice. We see this echoed in Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail, right? What do the moderate white church leaders say? That King is threatening the unity. We can't threaten the unity. We hear this echoed in our own time in the last several days since the insurrection, the coup attempt on January 6th. Whoa, we got to have unity. The Americans have to be united. Don't let these two men who don't even know your name divide you from your friends. So unity is too important, not too risk. But does this kind of non-contextualized unity, the goal of unity cut off from everything else Cyprian is saying, does that become its own means of corruption? So this is, when we talk about constant vigilance, the virtue itself might become an idol for us if it's cut off from the rest of the context of the faith, right? So what is heresy? Essentially, heresy is taking a part of the truth and making it the whole truth. So if we take the truth of unity and we separate it from the rest of the truth of God's gospel, it becomes as much of a heresy as anything else. That said, I think Cyprian is right. That the power of God has to be demonstrated in the unity of the church, or Christianity just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't work. It's failed. How, in a democratic society like ours, that elevates the liberties of the individual, my right to read the Bible and interpret it as I see fit. You can't tell me how to read the Bible, right? How do we have unity in that kind of context? When we don't value unity as a culture, when American society devalues unity and instead values the rebel, the individual, kind of heroically marching out on its own to overcome all the obstacles of the wilderness, So I think maybe Cyprian gives us a clue when several times in the text he refers again to two or three coming together in prayer. And it's almost like it's prayer that unites us. Not individual prayer and our alone and doing our morning devotionals. And not necessarily, I don't think, I could be wrong about this, I don't think this is the congregational prayer either, where the pastor is praying and everyone else is listening. But it's when, maybe it actually has to be a couple people, maybe it can't be 100, I don't know. This is a great conversation or question to think about. But a few people coming together and praying together to God. Could prayer in that sense become the source. So, he talks about the source of this river, right? The branches off in many different directions, but it's united in its source, right? So even though the one origin of the river, as it's coming down the mountain or whatever, separates into many little not tributaries anymore, but whatever you want to call them, streams, creeks. They're united in their origin. They're united in their source. And Cyprian definitely, as much as he, valued the primacy of the Bishop of Rome, he also stood up and opposed the Bishop of Rome at times. And he used Paul's opposition to Peter in the scriptures as justification for that, right? So it's not like we have to have a unity where there's no disagreement and there's unity by all costs, right? Through coercion or something like that. But if we can't be united in prayer, we can't be united at all. And maybe the union in prayer also brings about truth for us. I think, I can't remember if it's one of the readings or something else I was reading for today, talked about that love is the source of truth. I think it was another reading. That love is the source of truth. And maybe when we become united in prayer, Cyprian does talk about love in here, maybe our union in prayer helps us learn what it is to love one another and brings about truth in that regard. All right, I've gone longer than I anticipated. Apologies for the lengthy video.